They were cries for help that never came. Tonight, the gripping stories of children who fought to survive inside DCFS, the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services.
In this 3-year-long investigation, Dave Savini and the CBS 2 investigators uncovered stunning data exposing how the agency's own investigators cleared alleged child abusers nearly all of the time.
First thing, I noticed you've had a lot of hairdos over the years.
Yeah, I know.
On the surface, Kaylin Brown seems happy.
I cut my hair, grew it back, cut it again.
I think the last time I saw you, it was purple.
Yeah. Yeah.
A loving mother of 2 kids.
Count and breathe.
1, 2, 3.
Now hopes her darkest days are behind her.
No child should go through that. That's why I keep my kids close to me.
And you were 5.
Yeah.
Sexually assaulted when she was just 5, the same age as Kayla Rose, her oldest daughter.
It's not common for kids to catch an STD as young as I did, but that's the first time I caught my STD when I was 5.
Kaylin remembers at least 17 different foster homes and facilities and years of physical, mental, and sexual abuse in a child welfare system that was supposed to protect her.
All my life, nobody really wanted me.
She was still in the system when we first met her 3 years ago.
I was abused my whole entire life.
This is a gathering of 14 now adults.
I was in 30 within a year.
30 different homes.
Yes.
Sharing stories of horror as children.
And how old were you when you went into the system?
3.
14 survivors no longer silenced by the fear of retribution and abuse.
How young were you when you were first abused?
Probably 12.
I've been neglected.
All of them placed in foster care in the custody of DCFS, the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services.
I've been physically, sexually, mentally abused.
The agency's failure leaving each their own painful path of recovery.
I was physically and mostly abused. I was like beaten.
And when it comes to Kaylin, she's still trying to pull through the wreckage.
And you're homeless now, living in a shelter. And how old again are you?
I'm 19.
Another time that haunts her as a child is when 2 adult males from one of her foster families stole the Girl Scout cookie money she raised.
All of it. I had like over $600 that I've sold for cookies.
And you were hoping to get a prize?
Yes.
Like what could you have won?
It was basically like this big bicycle at the time.
After accusing the men, she says, to teach her a lesson, she was beaten and assaulted again.
I would say I was raped at least 3 to 4 times.
She says there were trips to the hospital, rape kits, and cries for help at school, but DCFS left her in abusive homes.
How many of you suffered abuse in foster homes?
Perhaps more twisted, these survivors say when they reported abuse, they were ignored, and the disturbing proof may be found here. Inside this DCFS database, after a long battle, the CBS 2 investigators obtained 5 years of abuse records. Every child has an 8-digit ID number. Line by line, row after row, cries for help. And our meticulous analysis uncovers a deeply troubling pattern. When a DCFS child is allegedly abused 9 out of 10 times, it is unfounded.
The department has a history of not believing the kids.
James McIntyre says his allegations also were not believed. He still suffers from the trauma.
I was sexually abused. I was neglected. I was starved.
He now helps DCFS survivors and heads the Foster Care Alumni Association of Illinois, which includes these 14.
Foster kids make the best victims.
The data the CBS 2 investigators obtained contains more than 6,000 abuse and neglect allegations made against 3,200 foster parents. And while nearly 90% of all allegations go unfounded, sexual offense allegations, including sex abuse risk, molestation, penetration, and exploitation, are also unfounded 88% of the time.
We respond to kids who've been abused.
Mark Smith has been director of DCFS since 2019.
I think that depending on the circumstance, we can all get better at the way we respond to the needs of all of our children and families.
The most common form of abuse in the DCFS data involves physical harm and neglect allegations like bone fractures, head injuries, burns, and torture. In a staggering number of these incidents, 91% unfounded by DCFS investigators.
In this entire group, nobody's abuser was ever charged with a crime.
I can't speak to if any individual case was brought to the police or not, but I will say this. Depending on the circumstance, depending on the perpetrator, cases are brought to the police from the DCFS perspective.
We wanted to know how often DCFS alerts police of allegations against foster parents, but they couldn't give us the data. They don't track it.
Did any of your abusers get convicted?
No.
Mine went on to actually work with children. If you're going to take, youth from their parents, you need to protect them.
Mallory Stout says she was placed into DCFS protective care when she was only 4. But once inside the system, the abuse just continued.
There's no reason why we should be receiving more abuse within the system than we receive within our own home.
Bad things happen in this system.
Jess McDonald is a former DCFS director who held the post for 10 years.
90% of all allegations made by youth in care go unfounded.
Wow.
Too often, DCFS kids are afraid to report the extent of their abuse.
If you're in a foster care setting, and there is always going to be a fear of reporting abuse because the potential for retaliation.
He says there's a DCFS rule requiring caseworkers conduct interviews with children alone without foster parents present.
I personally believe they would threaten and intimidate children and youth about reporting. And they would do it because they themselves are then at risk.
They would interview you in front of them? They would talk to you in front of them?
Yes,
but these 14 say that rule is almost never followed.
The whole time you telling them what's going on, your foster parent is just looking at you like, I can't wait until you get home so I can talk to you.
Kaylin says one foster parent even tore up the only picture she had left of her dad, who died when she was just a child, as a form of retribution for speaking up.
My caseworker didn't really care.
Do you feel like there's hope?
There is, baby. Don't ever lose hope. That's all you got most of the time.
3 years after that group interview, we found Kaylin living on her own with her children. We will be doing more stories with this group. They want to fix the system. DCFS says since 2020, things have gotten better, saying recurrent cases of maltreatment have decreased. Dave Savini, CBS 2 Investigators.
An Illinois lawmaker is demanding accountability and change following a staggering discovery by the CBS 2 investigators. 90% of child abuse and neglect allegations made against foster care parents were classified as unfounded. Tonight, Dave Savini talks with former foster children who say the system lets abusers get away with it as the number of allegations continues to rise.
There is a serious issue with DCFS. It is a child protective service, but yet these kids don't feel protected.
Illinois State Representative Lakeisha Collins knows about foster care abuse. She grew up in the DCFS system, but what she didn't know was just how overwhelmingly often Illinois foster care parents are cleared of abuse and neglect allegations.
It's really, really mind-boggling for me.
How many of you suffered abuse in foster homes?
Last month, we showed you how these 14 foster care survivors came forward to CBS to help expose this troubling pattern of unfounded abuse within DCFS.
How young were you when you were first abused?
Probably 12. I was physically and mostly abused. I was beaten.
Collins was watching and could relate to their traumas.
Did you see yourself in that group of 14?
Yes. Yes. Those former youth in care, they were not lying. They were telling the truth.
The CBS 2 investigators conducted an exhaustive analysis of how thousands of child abuse and neglect allegations dating back to 2016 were handled by DCFS. Every child has an 8-digit ID number. After a lengthy battle for records, we obtained never-before-seen data revealing a deeply troubling pattern. When an allegation of child abuse or neglect is made, 9 out of 10 times, DCFS classifies it as unfounded.
Did you have any idea that the numbers were as big as we found?
No, I did not. I did not, and it's disheartening.
Collins, who's been trying to reform the agency, says despite repeated requests, DCFS has stonewalled her from getting the kind of crucial data the CBS 2 investigators have now uncovered. In the foster care data DCFS did turn over, we found cries for help are climbing. In 2016, 961 claims. In 2021, that number shot up to 1,205, a 25% increase for complaints of abuse and neglect.
So you're saying CBS Chicago has this data?
You have the data, and I don't, and I'm the lawmaker.
And a light bulb's going off.
It is, because what else are we not getting?
The most common form of abuse we found in the DCFS data involves physical harm and neglect allegations like bone fractures, head injuries, burns, and torture. In a staggering number of these allegations, 91% unfounded by DCFS investigators.
I've been neglected. I've been physically, sexually, mentally abused.
And they know how to hit you. They know how to hit you without leaving marks.
Did any of your abusers get convicted?
No.
Collins says she was a teenager when a foster parent physically assaulted her.
You were beaten up while you were in foster care.
She beat me up, right? In front of other kids in the house.
You want to make a change in the system.
I do. How many more kids got to die? How many more have to get raped or harmed in the current operations?
No child should go through that. That's why I keep my kids.
Take the case of Kaylin Brown, sexually assaulted when she was just 5.
It's not common for kids to catch an STD as young as I did, but that's the first time I caught my STD when I was 5.
Kaylin says her cries for help went unanswered after 2 men sexually assaulted her during her time in foster care.
And how old again are you?
I'm 19.
Kaylin says despite trips to the hospital and rape kits, DCFS left her in abusive homes. The data the CBS 2 investigators obtained contains more than 6,000 abuse and neglect allegations made against 3,200 foster parents. And while nearly 90% of all abuse and neglect allegations were deemed unfounded, sexual offense allegations like sexual abuse risk, molestation, penetration, and exploitation are also unfounded by DCFS 88% of the time.
What did the DCFS data that we uncovered and organized, what did that say to you? What did you see in those numbers?
Whew, that it is a culture that has allowed this system to cover up abuse.
When CBS requested the records of how many of those 6,000 allegations DCFS referred to police, DCFS told us they couldn't turn that over because they don't have it. They don't keep track.
The public looks at it as if you're being, you're deceiving the public.
You want to pass a law that will require DCFS to track these cases?
Yes. The tracking part is important because how then can you see the red flags?
She says even her allegation of abuse in foster care was never investigated.
It was like it never happened.
And nobody ever reported it to police?
No. Police were not notified. The caseworker never followed up with me. That is the culture of this system. And that is why what you all are doing is so important.
Collins now wants accountability from a system that has kept its records shrouded in secrecy for decades.
Right now, we're losing. We're losing. We're losing lives. Kids who could have promising futures, who could be the next doctor, scientist, lawyer. Their dreams are cut short because they were neglected.
For more than a year and a half, DCFS has been telling the CBS 2 investigators they don't have police referral data. But late today, DCFS changed its story, and they're now telling us they do have that data after all, and are now finally working on giving it to us. Dave Savini, CBS 2 investigators.